Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside Invasion Malta. This is a game designed by Vance von Voorhees and is published by Legion Wargames. Well, Legion made the announcement that this one was available this week. It was off the CPO. Been waiting for it for a while. I know a lot of people have. And sent my payment and they sent me the game. And true to form for Legion, it shipped very, very quickly. I got it within a couple days. So just got it today. Wanted to take a look inside with you so that way if you were curious about this game, you could see what comes inside of it. If you were considering whether or not you were going to get it, you can see whether you want to get it. But you know that if it's Legion Wargames, the quality's always going to be top notch. On top of Invasion Malta, the game also includes a bonus game, Battle for Leros, 12 to 16 November 1943. So you're getting two games in one. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. Our hobby has the unique ability to explore the great what-if questions of events in history. Here, what if during World War II, the Axis had attempted to invade Malta? While the situation is hypothetical, the German invasion plans were real, and the game includes the highest quality order of battle for both sides. Invasion Malta is a grand tactical level game featuring several possible World War II invasions of Malta, fall 1940, spring 1941, and summer 1942. The Axis player uses amphibious landings and airdrops to bring his units into the battle, while the Allied player defends with artillery bombardments and from behind heavy fortifications. Also included is the historical Axis sea-air invasion of the island of Leros in November of 1943. Game scale is company to battalion, map scale 600 yards per hex, turn scale is 8 hours per turn, and the playing time is 8+ hours. For components, we get a 25 by 44 inch map, 22 by 25 inch Leros map, 40-page rulebook, 16-page scenario book, 700 counters, and multiple setup and player aid cards. It is for 2 players, game complexity is medium, and solitaire suitability is medium-high. You can see an example of the counters here, as well as the maps on the top. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we got some baggies, D10 and more baggies. And for a new book coming out, rules of play, scenario book, whole bunch of player aids, and setup sheets, counters, and our maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. It is a beautifully done map, typical of what we get from Legion Wargames. Always top shelf quality productions for them. Take 2 maps, lay one on top of the other, create your full map. At the top right, we have the game turn track. Below that, we have the terrain key explaining all the different terrain features on the map. Below that, we have the motor pool track. And then we start off with the East Zone track. We move all the way around to the Jaffa Zone. We got 5 different zones that you're going to be having for your units that are available, as well as those that are delayed. The map is very easy to read. The terrain feature is very easy to read. All your airfields are in yellow, like this big giant one here for Takali, and then you've got a few others. All these red hexes, those are your victory locations. So very easy to see where your victory locations are. They just stand out very, very clearly, which is beautiful to have. On the left-hand side, we have the Allied activation pool. Then below that, we have the Axis activation pool, the Axis air status card for ready and bombardment, damaged and flown. Then we have down here the paradrop drift DRMs, as well as the paradrop procedure, and then the drift diagrams here. Everything is very easy to read and beautifully done. We also, one other thing I forgot to mention is we have the brigade areas that are broken down with these red lines. You have the Northern Brigade, Central Brigade, and then the Southern Brigade. So that's also going to be easy to understand on the map. But once again, beautifully done map from Legion. Next, we'll take a look at the Leros map. This is very much like we saw with the Malta map. It's going to be the exact same design layout. Game turn track at the top left. In the middle, we've got the motor pool track. You get the Allied and Axis activation pools. At the top right down here, we have the paradrop drift DRMs and diagram notes, as well as the diagram for drifting, your paradrop procedures. Then below that we have the Axis Air Status card, ready bombardment, damaged and flown, West Invasion Zone, East Invasion Zone, and the island is broken into 3 different sectors, Northern, Central, and Southern. Again, your victory locations are the red hexes, so very easy to read those. And if you're looking at the Malta map and you've played that, you're going to know exactly what you're going to have here on the Laros map, and vice versa if you play this first before playing the Malta map. Next, we'll take a look at the player aid cards. We're going to start off with the setup cards for the different scenarios. This is Scenario 1, Malta 1940. This is the Axis setup card. Then we have the Allied setup card. Then we get into the longer setup cards. These are fold-out cardstock. This is the Allied setup for Scenario 2, Malta 1941. Then we have the Axis setup card. Next, we have Scenario 3, Malta 1942. This is the Allied setup card. Then we have the Axis setup, which is also going to extend down to a 3rd panel here. Next, we have the setup card for Scenario 4, Malta 1943. This is the Allied setup card. And then the Axis setup card. Now we'll take a look at the rest of the player aid cards. We start off with the terrain effects chart, which lists out the terrain type, movement point costs, bombardment DRMs, and the terrain effects on combat. On the next sheet, we get our combat results table, as well as the combat coordination table on the bottom. Next, we have the artillery capabilities chart and the bombardment table. Then we have the victory point schedule, then the anti-aircraft table, as well as the coast artillery chart for both Malta and Laros. Then we have the landing condition table and the convoy arrival table. And lastly, we have the expanded sequence of play, which is a fold-out. Start off with the strategic segment, operations segment, reorganization segment, and then we get to the operations sequences, ground sequence, and the pass option. Next, we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game. We start off here on the first sheet with the German forces. On the next sheet, we have the Italians. Then we have the British forces. And on the last sheet, we have the remainder of the British forces along with the administrative counters for use in the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 40-page full-color rulebook. On the front page, we have the table of contents listing on all the different rule sections and their associated page numbers. Then we have the introduction and then the historical settings for both Malta and Laros. Inside of the front cover, we have the general introduction, your game components, your maps, your counters, explaining to you how to read all your counters. Remember, color code is gray for German, green for Italian, and khaki brown for the British. Get into the player aid cards, your abbreviations, terminology, zones of control with an illustrated example at the top here. Stacking, and as you notice, you got these notes here that are sprinkled throughout, whether it's a design note or a note or something of importance to draw your attention. They're in these nice orange call-out boxes, so you shouldn't miss those. Unit steps, halving and rounding, combat unit movement classes, efficiency and lead units, disruption, and then we get into playing the game, preparing for play, and then the turn outline, formations, activation markers, allied formations, weather conditions and effects, supply, your supply status, supply routes, supply sources with illustrated example, activation and operations sequence under operations, ground unit movement, how to move your units, ZOC effects on movement with illustrated example, terrain effects on movement, and again, more design notes as well as an example that's in that orange call-out box. Day and night restrictions, infiltration movement, pre-combat actions. We've got the combat declaration, reaction, optional rule, which is combat refusal. Then artillery, bombardment restrictions, artillery bombardment, artillery in combat, coastal artillery, air power, air unit restrictions, air mission restrictions, anti-aircraft fire, air bombardment missions, close air support missions. Then we get into combat, your attack requirements, effects of terrain on combat, ER differential, combat coordination, determining combat odds, resolving combat, reading combat results, combat losses, retreating through an enemy ZOC with an illustrated example showing you how to retreat through an enemy ZOC. Advancing, then we get into fortifications, the fort and pillbox units, airborne operations, organizing the paradrop, the airhead, paradrop unit placement, drift procedures, unit landing conditions, drift combat, air transport. Then we get into naval operations, the naval transport phase, convoys, and then the amphibious invasion. The beachhead, command points for your special units. You got your command points, headquarters formations, commandos, Italian M formations, Axis glider units, naval units. And then we have optional role for anti-tank defense, and then special situations, which is the Allied motor pool and rally. Also have Allied harbor boom, and then how to win your victory locations, and then the Axis sudden victory. We've got some images here at the end. And on the back, we have the combat results table as well as the combat coordination tables. And lastly, we have the scenario book. This is a 16-page book that's going to give you all of the different scenarios for both Malta and Leros. Start off with scenario 1, Malta 1940. Tells you all the components you're going to need, your scenario length, your placement, special scenario rules, and then your victory conditions. And that's going to follow on for all of your scenarios. Then we have scenario 2, Malta 1941. Scenario 3, Malta 1942. And then scenario 4 is going to be Leros 1943. That's going to use the Leros map. Same thing, same layout, just that you're going to be using the Leros map. Then we have the unit abbreviations for both the German, Italian, and the British forces. So that way, if you see like KG, you don't know what that is, just look it up here, it's Kampf Group, so on and so forth. Then we have the annotated bibliography. That's going to carry over to the next page. Then we have some notes from Vance von Voorhees and John Burt, Italian specialist units, paradrop drift. Then we have the designer's notes from Vance von Voorhees. And that carries over to the back of the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of Invasion Malta. This is a game designed by Vance von Voorhees and is published by Legion Wargames. Well, when Legion first announced this, I was like, you know what? I don't have a lot of games in the med, so why don't I pick this one up? It comes with 2 different games, essentially. You got Malta and then you got Leros. So, yeah, 4 different scenarios, 2 different areas. Sure, I'm going to give this one a shot. Plus, it's got no Americans. It's just the British, Germans, and Italians. So that's something also unique for me. I don't have a lot of non-US games outside of the East Front stuff that I play, which is obviously just Germans and Soviets. So I wanted to get something that was just British specific against the Germans and Italians. So definitely wanted to pick this one up, and I'm glad I did. It looks really beautiful, and I'm sure it's going to be a really, really fun game. As you can see, everything that comes with it is top-notch. The rulebook looks really easy to read. The maps are very easy to read, and they did a fantastic job with them. You've got plenty of player aid cards. All the player aid cards are single-sided. That's why when we went through them, I wasn't flipping them over. I was literally just going individual. So that's fantastic, because a lot of times you get those that you flip over. Some of them, you need both sides a lot. So I end up basically scanning and printing out another copy so I can have both of them facing up. Legion took care of that for us and just did them all individually. So that's fantastic. But overall, just looks like a really excellent package, another excellent package from Legion Wargames. So if you have been considering this game, it is available now. So jump on it now with the CPO price of $65. It is available, and they're shipping real quick. Like I said, I got the note to go ahead and pay it just the other day. I placed the order, and boom, it was here a few days later on my doorstep. And that's why I've opened it up to take a look inside and share with you. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.